of Chicago at the laboratory schools that was founded by John Dewey in 1892. And I told stories there for 23 years every week. And now I'm doing research into the effects of listening to stories on young children. But this is one of my favorite stories. And you can find it in many cultures. And we can talk about it afterwards. And I think it is truly a story of wisdom. Once, there was a woman, and there's no kind way to say this, but she was hideous. Her eyes were rheumy. If she stuck her tongue out, she could touch the tip of her nose. Her skin had scars all over. There were few teeth left in her mouth and little hair on her head. And her clothes were ragged. And everywhere she went in her town, people would turn their backs on her. She would try to talk to them, they would walk away. Sometimes they would even go into their houses and close their doors. And this was really sad, because all this woman wanted was a friend, someone to talk to. And when she looked around and realized that no one in her town would be willing to speak with her, she decided that she would leave and she would walk into the desert. And she would walk until she found a place where she would be welcomed. So she left. And she began to walk, and she walked for many, many days. And at last, she came to a town that was so far away from anything else. She said to herself, here in this town, people will ask me to speak with them, to be their friends. And so she looked through the gates of the town, and she could see that the market was in full force. Everyone was out. Everyone was talking. People were buying and selling and laughing. And she smiled. And she walked right in and went over to the marketplace. And people turned their backs. They wouldn't look at her. Some people went to their houses and shut their doors. And she said, there is nothing left. There is nothing left. I am going to sit outside the gate and wait to die. And so she went out and sat by the gate. And as she was sitting there, a young man came with a beautiful cape. And he walked right by her without stopping. He didn't even notice her. And he went up to the marketplace. And people came over to him. They invited him to buy from them. They told him stories. They held him around and patted his back. He laughed with them. They brought him food and drink. They brought him presents. And all the while, the women sat and watched. And at last, it was time for the young man to leave. And so he turned around, said his goodbyes, shook hands, hugged people, and walked right through the gate. And the woman couldn't help herself. She said, so, is it always like that for you? And he said, what? What do you mean? And she said, do people always greet you like that? They welcome you in, they tell you stories, they give you food and drink, they give you presents. And he very humbly said, yes. And she said, who are you? Are you a king? A prince? Are you a nobleman? And he said, no, I'm very common. you can find my kind of person everywhere. And she said, really? Who are you? And he said, I am Story. Who are you? And she said, Story. I am Truth. No one wants to speak to truth. No one welcomes me. And he said, I am sorry. I'll tell you what. Why don't you come with me? I will wrap my cloak around you, and people will not see you, but they will come to talk to us, and they will welcome us. They will give us food and drink. They will give us presents. And she shook her head and said, no. If I come with you, people won't speak to you. They won't welcome you. And he said, I think you are wrong. Let us try. And so she agreed. And the next town they came to, he wrapped his cloak around her. And they went in together. And they were greeted by everyone. And that is why, to this very day, truth is always more acceptable when wrapped in a story.
Oh, thank you.